Hello everyone and welcome to this lecture on doing a digital anthropology. Now I will try to maneuver this screen recording so that you can both see me in the camera here as well as the PowerPoint presentation. So bear with me while I just set up the screen. So it will be more better visible. Okay, so I guess we can start here. Okay, I know that those of you who take the program are also taking the course doing qualitative methods with Ugo Corte, and I know that he's been talking about ethnography with you. So for those of you who take this to take Ugo's course, there might be some repetition, even though I know Ugo did not talk about digital anthropology or digital ethnography and ethnography that we will talk about in this lecture. So today we will talk a little bit about the group work. Me and Sylvain are finalizing the details. It's important that you, if there are any questions, that you bring them to the class Thursday, because this is the time when we will be able to answer questions. Both Sylvain and I will be away a little bit during next week, so you need to answer think this through carefully, so you bring the questions with you. I know with the literature seminar there were a lot of questions and unclarities, even though I asked you in class. So really think through so you get the answers you need in order to conduct your group work. Talk a little bit about community, since you are going to study an online community. So what is an online community? You're supposed to do an ethnography, so we'll do a little short overview of what is ethnography, some repetition for those of you taking Ugo Corte's course, talk a little bit about culture, and then I'll just mention my own experience and some problems I have had doing digital ethnography. So the group work. So what you are expected to do is to choose an online community to study ethnographically. This is the reason why I'll give this lecture, so you know what is meant by an online community and what is meant by doing ethnographic study in the group. So and what you will start with is initial participant observations to decide what particular practice in the community you wish to focus on. I mean, those of you taking Ugo's course, you know that these short ethnographies that you are going to do, very short time ethnographies, require a lot of preparation. So you need to be prepared, and you cannot study perhaps everything. You have to choose one aspect of the group to study. And then after you get acquainted with the group, with the online community you want to study, think about what theoretical framework you want to use to understand the practices under study. And see whether this theoretical framework can further your observation. So it's important that you also connect your work to the theoretical frameworks and concepts discussed in class. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to find the perfect concept to discuss, or theoretical idea to discuss. Maybe you can use your observations to criticize an idea, to falsify an idea. So don't be stressed if the theoretical framework you have chosen do not work with your case study, well, not case study, with your ethnography, with the online community you're going to work with. This could be perhaps very interesting. Maybe we need to elaborate the concept. So it's not about finding the perfect theoretical model to explain what is going on. It could also be about criticizing a theoretical model with your empirical data here, your online study. In order in order for your friends to be able to ask you interesting questions, we also want you to upload a free to maximum 4 pages report on your studies 2 days before the presentation, October 14th. Yes. Times New Roman, size 12, 1.5. Spacing. Now, the reason for this is only for the other groups to formulate questions to ask you during the presentation. So this is not something that will be marked or commented upon by me or Sylvain. It's for the other students. So what we will in this very short report is to present the community under study, half a page maximum, and then what was the results, summarize them on 1.5 page very shortly, and then discuss whether the theoretical framework was beneficial to understand your results or not, maybe, and the theoretical implications of your study, approximately 1 page. So these all the other groups will have to read this report before the presentations, the 16th, and within the group, not separately, together in the group, you decide, having read through the other group's reports, one point of constructive criticism to discuss, a question, a point of criticism, something that you want to discuss during the presentation, the 16th, but one thing together in the group. Now, if there is any unclarities about what you're supposed to do bring them with you to the class this Thursday, the 2nd. During the presentations, October 16th, you're expected to read all the other groups' report and agree within the group of one point of criticism you want to discuss with this group. And when you do present your results to your classmates, do take into account that all your classmates have read the report. So you don't have to account for everything in detail here, because we have read the report. I mean, I know during the literature seminar that many of you were very much in detail going through the articles, but we had read the articles. Similarly here we have read the report, so you can take this as a starting point, that we know what this is about since we have read the report. Now, since there are only 4 groups, you have quite a long time at your disposal, about 40 minutes each, including then these discussions from the other groups. Our suggestion is that you present your work for 20 minutes and we can have a 20-minute discussion. The order of the groups will be raffled, so this is, we don't know this in advance. And also, the 16th is not the day to have technological problems, since the time is limited, so make sure you test all the technology before the presentations. Now, we know that group work, some of you love group work, but there is also a lot of people who hate group work. We know this, but it's in the learning outcomes that we will work in group, and in your professions, you will most likely work in groups and also work with people you don't like. So this is a good learning outcome here, learning opportunity for you to actually work in group. Now, we are going to give you a grade, or actually Sylvain is going to give you a grade on this group work, and this has caused a lot of problems in the past when you in the group are dependent on the performance of your group mates. So therefore we also urge you to submit an individual report. Now, this is only in the case that there is problems within the group, and then Sylvain needs to know how the group work has performed, how the group has worked internally. So very shortly, just answer these questions, 1 page maximum. What did I contribute to? Was there someone who did not contribute to the group work? What was particularly successful and what could be improved? This is not mandatory, but if there is a group that will fail, and you cannot come afterhand and say that, this person did not perform, it's because of this person we did fail. If we see this individual report and all the individual report points at the same problem in the group, then it's possible to do an individual grading. But without this individual report, we cannot do this individual grading. And also, if there is problems within the group work, do notify us as soon as possible. It's not wise to wait till the last day. Things can still be changed in the beginning of the group work, but perhaps more difficult to change things after the group, in the middle of the group work. So the individual report, in order for Sylvain to see how the group worked internally, if there was one person who was perhaps behind the failure of the group, or a couple of person, or one person who did all the work in the group, this can be taken into account when grading. Do note that there is only a pass or a fail grade for the group work, and you have the criteria for the group work that we will judge you on, or Sylvain will judge you on during the presentation, also having a glance through the report. Now, do remember, the report is not, you will not get it back corrected. Sylvain will of course have read it. I will also look through it because I'm curious what you will do. But these are the criteria Sylvain will look at when he grades you. Systematically and critically discuss key issues and debates regarding these theories. Are you doing that? Are you employing and applying concepts? It's about application here. You're actually going to apply the concepts to an empirical setting. Can you analyze and reflect upon this material in group together? Are you able to do this? Do you have skills in presentation and discussions? This is also important to show for this group work, and you will be graded. This will be taken into account when Sylvain grades you. And then you should demonstrate skills in presentation, already said this, as well as constructive criticism. So it's important you keep this in mind, these criteria, because these criteria is that you will be judged upon when your group grade is getting passed on. And if there is a problem in the group, the individual reports will be taken into account to see whether there is some in the group that perhaps deserve a pass while others don't. So this is important. Okay, so let's go then on to the actual lecture here. Starting with community. So what do we mean by online community? How can we talk about communities in the online world? Now, Miller, he talks about network instead of community in the course book. So there, I'm back again, sorry. In the course book, when he goes through the changing communities from Gemeinschaft to Gesellschaft, together with urbanization, industrialization, and globalization, and individualization in late modernity. Now, Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. Gemeinschaft is, it was Ferdinand Tönnies who coined this concept, where Gemeinschaft is more refers to the closely knit bonds in a society, these close bonds between family and kin that started to be loosened up when urbanization, individualization, and industrialization happened. And this is where he says that communities changed from being more about this community, Gemeinschaft, and more to Gesellschaft. So we can see, and perhaps as we're moving towards the conception of community as a Gesellschaft, perhaps, and in a digital environment, perhaps it is more reasonable to think about this as networks. A suggestion here. We know, from previous lectures, we know that individuals and collectives are not mutually exclusive. The concept of networked individualism, and perhaps this is also one reason Miller rather speaks about networks and communities here. Okay, let me see here. Now, Miller is not the only one making this connection between community and network in online digital societies. Barry Wellman, perhaps the founding father of the concept of networked individualism, He also refers to community as networks of interpersonal ties that provide sociability, support, information, and sense of belonging and social identity. So also Barry Wellman talks about communities as networks. He does not make this distinction, actually. He thinks of them as the same thing. And when he says that most people today operate in multiple thinly connected community as they deal with networks of kin, Gemeinschaft, as well as neighbors, friends, workmates, etc., which would be then more Gesellschaft. Okay. Similarly, network theorist Barabasi, he also talks about communities within networks as groups of nodes that tend to connect more to each other than we would expect randomly. Now, I think it's important for you to understand that there are different ways to conceive of communities and network within network theory as well as in sociology as such. So, I mean, if we look here at this a network map here, we can see these nodes that connect more tightly here. The more dark areas in the network map would be what he would claim would be a community, nodes that connect more to each other. But what this does highlight is the importance of ties, and perhaps it's also important for you to look at when you study your communities. What are the strong ties in this community? What are the weak ties here? What are perhaps the intermediary ties? I mean, or the bridging ties? Who are the bridges between two communities? What Castells talks about as bridging power or switching power, networking power for that. I mean, so this is thinking about communities as networks, bringing the concept of ties into this equation makes it important to perhaps think about what are the ties in these communities? How can we conceptualize and conceive of these ties? So this would be one way to go about studying the communities. Now, another one who has tried to define what an online community is Robert Carsinetz, who's also been written perhaps the most well-cited book on ethnography. He refers online community to a interacting, communicating group of people using computers to sustain a common arena online. So it's about a group of people that sustain something online. It's about shared values, beliefs, norms, and ideas. And this is also Axel Brand's when he talks about online communities. He talks about groups of people and this sense of they share something, norms, beliefs, ideas, which could also be a very interesting thing for you to investigate into in the group in the community you choose to look into. What are the norms? What are the beliefs? What are the values here? So this idea that there are something shared, some kind of perhaps some shared rituals, some kind of regulatory regimes, what is allowed or not, I mean norms, in other words, that there is some kind of collectiveness in the action here through these interaction patterns online, and some kind of creation of emotional bonds, a sense of belonging, that we are a group indeed. This is indeed afforded by social media. And perhaps it could be argued, and it has been argued, that communities are even easier to maintain today, given the lowering cost of communication and self-presentation and connection building on social media. So perhaps it's even easier both to create communities today as well as study, as we will get into when we get to the ethnography part of the lecture. However, regardless of terminology, it's important to know that community is not bound to territory today. It's more about meaning making, human association characterized by personal ties, weak ties, strong ties, intermediary ties, and there's different ways to conceive of ties, as well as belongingness among its members. Interest in meaning makings are what defines these communities today rather than territory. which of course, I mean, we've been talking about theories of late modernity, so this idea or emphasis on meaning making and interest makes more sense in a late modern society where digital communication in some cases transcend geographical boundaries, some cases not. We talked about this in a way, and unites users around cultural interests, lifestyles, and tastes. So, and this could also be something that is worth looking into when you look for a community you want to study. So at the same time, it's important to underline that the community may be a site of conflict. Yeah, it's important this could be an interesting thing to study. Conflict within a community. It doesn't have to be that everyone agrees. I mean, norm breakings, someone who breaks the norms could be hugely interesting. What happens if you break the norm? How are people policed here? This could perhaps be interesting. So it doesn't mean that you have to look for something that is very tightly connected and there is nothing, no conflictual going on here. I know one of my master students, Simone Schöpf, did study the couch surfing organization and looked at conflicts about ideas of whether you could sell out for a commercial advertisement or not. So there was a conflict about this value of being a free and open space or being used by commercial purposes on this community. It was a very interesting master thesis. So this to underline that, you know, conflict is interesting to study here. Don't forget that. And as you know, online community is something you need to study in the group work. Okay, so this leads us to the more methodological part of the lecture. Now, this might be some repetition for those of you who attended Ugo's class Monday, but for those of you taking this as an elective course, it will just be a short overview of ethnography and for those of you who see this as just a repetition. Okay, camera, here we are. So ethnography is basically an explorative method. It's not a hypothesis testing method in that sense, that you don't go out to the field with already formed hypothesis. You go out in the field in order you want to explore it. You're open to what it has to bring into you. So it's, even though that when you do short ethnographies, you have to be more prepared, as Ugo has been talking about, it's also about being open to the field, which perhaps is even more difficult when you do these short-term ethnographies. And the quest of an ethnography is to understand what's going on rather than predict and explain in that sense. You want to understand what is going on in these natural situation or this culture or this community. What's going on here? Why? You know, the question of why is this so? And you also often study natural situation in the sense that you don't create situations to study like you would do in an experiment, for example, or in an interview. In an interview, you create an empirical material that does not exist naturally. In ethnographies, it's about, I mean, you overhear conversations, you study interactions more than go in an interview and create your data. You study data that is already there, in a sense. As you know, ethnography comes from anthropology, and anthropology, anthropos, do we have Melisanti would know, coming from Greek-speaking country, that this means man. So anthropology is the science of mankind. And it has also been used mostly by one anthropologist, Western anthropologists, going to non-Western cultures and studied the whole culture for a long time. And this picture here is Malinowski when he was studying the Trobriand Islands. So it has mostly been connected to this kind of research, while today, as we will talk about later, we can do short-time ethnographies and we can also do them online. And we don't have to go to exotic culture. And what is an exotic culture, by the way? I mean, cultures within Sweden could be very exotic. Well, ethno means people, and graphy or graphine means to write. So ethnography literally means writings about people. So it's both a method, a result you produce in ethnography, as well as a theory. So it's all these different things at the same time. And you, as you study a few cases very carefully, or you perhaps study a whole culture very carefully, rather than a lot of things shallowly. It's not about generalizations, even though perhaps speaking to Ugo today, some anthropologists wouldn't agree. But it's not in the case a case study in that sense that the case represents a population that you're supposed to draw generalization from studying this case to all kinds of population. No, ethnography is about understanding what is in front of me right now. What I'm seeing now is not about thinking that, oh, this means all of this for society. It's about understanding the culture, the community that you have in front of you. And it's also inductive, as I said before, in the sense that you have to be open for the field. What is happening on the field? So it's a kind of, in the sense that you don't always depart from a defined theory or defined hypothesis. You're open to what you see, even though when you do short-term ethnographies, you have to be more prepared, because you don't have the time to stay for years in this field. You're not writing your PhD about this. So it's about thick description. It has to be very thick in order to describe the forest, here the culture. You have to attend to all the trees in the forest. You have to do a thick description. Yes, as been said before, early studies was mostly dealt with exotic cultures, long way from home, non-Western research going to Western, non-Western cultures and staying there for a long time. Margaret Mead went to the Samoa Islands, Evans Pritchard went to the Sande people in Africa, and Branislav Malinowski did his studies in the Trobriand Islands. So these are one of perhaps the most well-known early anthropologists. But then, of course, what is an exotic culture? Don't we have exotic culture at home? I know that Ugo has talked about the Chicago School, how you could actually, how they started headed by Erving Goffman, to actually do ethnographies at home, and basically he just sent out his students to the street to have a look at what was happening here. What's happening? What are you seeing here? What's happening in this culture? And there are of course also studies of jazz cultures, people smoking a lot of marijuana in the 40s, 30s, and 40s that were studied as an exotic culture, even though it happened at home. The same with studies of homosexual and their use of public toilets could be perhaps for many people a very exotic culture, even though this goes on at home. So the idea that you have to travel very far away doesn't apply anymore, and thanks to the Chicago School. And then we should also see that when you are going to faraway places, perhaps there is also the possibility of deception, and the most famous case here is Margaret Mead studying the sexuality of youngsters in Samoa, the islands of Samoa, and where basically they told her that they were very sexually active and outspoken. Then it's been claimed that this perhaps was not the case. Maybe they were just pulling her leg. And I find this cartoon by Gary Larson very funny. It should say, here you see it, anthropologist, and you see the natives hiding all their things. So this is important to understand that many of these early ethnographies has been accused of not being accurate accounts. And this leads to another thing that is very important here let me see if I can get this a little bit smaller so we can all see this, which is very important in ethnography, that is that the fieldwork is positioned. When doing ethnography, you have to take into account who you are and what happens to this field when you enter to the field. Who you are and what you will influence the research. Hence, that's also one reason why you cannot generalize ethnographies, because you will, by definition, get different results if someone else comes into the field. I mean, if you're a man, if you're a woman, you will get different results. So the idea here of neutrality, whether you can be neutral when you do fieldwork, is questioned. And then there is the idea of going native, of being native. I mean, I think this picture is severely funny. The idea that that perhaps people staying so long in a culture or in a community becomes like the people in the community, that they actually do not have this critical view of what's going on. On the other hand, perhaps you need to be part of the culture to really understand it. So the debate here about going native or being native is of huge interest. Can you understand a community or a culture if you do not belong to it? Is it possible to see interesting phenomena in a culture you do not belong to yourself? As I just said, well, the answer to this question I would suggest would be to see the cultural understudy from the perspective of its participants, get this deep understanding, as it's called, while at the same time trying to keep this necessary distance to be able to analyze the community or the culture here systematically. So trying to find this balance, which is not always easy, to both be able to look at what is happening here from a distant point of view, as well as becoming so part of the culture that you really get a deep understanding what it's about. Now, when I did my PhD in Helsingborg, in the municipal corridors of the city of Helsingborg in south of Sweden, sometimes when I didn't see anything new there, I couldn't see that nothing interesting was happening when I did my observations, I imagined that I was an alien. I did the so-called alien test. I mean, what if you were an alien and you were dropped, from the spaceship, dropped into this municipal meeting? What would you see? Which is very interesting, because then you see, like, okay, people are drinking coffee a lot here. People are eating cake. People seem crazy about cake. Fika. What is this fika about? For example, so you can. Ethnography is not only about becoming part of the culture, it's also about trying to see what is interesting with this culture, and for this you need both an inside understanding as well as an outside view on it, I argue. I know that some ethnographers would not agree, so you know that this is contested. Yes, ethnography is about community and culture. I've been mentioning the word culture many times here, very shortly, and culture can mean many different things. Here I talk about culture in an anthropological sense, as a way of life, a whole way of life, as Clifford Geertz, the Dutch famous anthropologist, has outlined. And this is different from culture as the refinement of the senses, in the sense that we go to the opera, we are engaging in the cultural life, we read the Nobel laureates in literature. This is kind of refinement of the sense, which is the meaning of culture when you go to the culture section of the newspaper. Now, culture in when we talk about ethnography means this anthropological sense of culture as a way of life. And once again, certain concepts reappear here: values, beliefs, knowledge, rituals that kind of guides people's behavior. What values, beliefs, norms guides people's behavior in this community that you are going to study? Hugely interesting to see. And I know that both Sylvain and I look forward to what you find here. Anthropologists focus on life as lived and all the mess of factors that comes with that, so-called holism, as been Miller and Horst talked about in the first chapter in the course, in the readings for this lecture. And it's about meaning makings. Culture is about making meaning of your life. Why are you sitting and listening to this lecture right now? Perhaps it's sunny outside and you do not go outside. What are the culture behind this? How do you make meaning of this practice? This community of students sitting here and watching me right now. Hugely weird. Why are you doing this? Because you attach meanings to this. You think your education is important, that it will lead to something. And there is also a societal norm that education is important. So it's about this, disentangling the meaning makings around practices, communities, and cultures. All actors are actively engaged in the production and maintenance of meaning. How is this done? It's hugely interesting. How do people attach meaning, and what kind of meanings do they attach to their practices? These are very much anthropological, ethnographic questions for you to ask when you do your ethnographies. As Clifford Geertz, okay, Mark, you have to correct me if my pronunciation here is wrong. We are trapped in the midst of a web of meaning we ourselves have spun, he says, Clifford. And using this metaphor, the web would be culture. Culture would be the web that we spin around us. And perhaps here, media is part of the spinning wheel, the one spinning this web, or the spider, in this case, if we take the spider's web, as in the picture. Media is a very interesting aspect of meaning making, and it has huge effects on how meaning is made. Technologies are also meaningful objects in that it has function attached to them, as well as they have connotations that associate them to other aspects of social life. So we make not only does technologies and media technologies help us spin this web of meaning around us, we also attach meaning to the technologies in themselves. This is what Horst in the chapter 3, page 62, talks about as double articulation. So let's have a look what it says here in the book, page 62. Okay. Double articulation and new media technologies are not only objects, but they also link the private sphere with the public sphere, and in turn facilitates the negotiation of meaning both within and through their use. So they help in producing meaning, maintaining meaning, and we also attach meaning to them. And this is also what Baim says here. People assign and generate meanings to technologies through reflective communication, that we are reflective about our media use. Just think of, for example, Apple. I mean, Apple is perhaps the prime example. It's going to talk about technologies that are attached with, that we attach meaning to. What does it mean to have Apple computer? What does this Apple mean? I mean, of course, it's something that we attach meanings to, and we and you know, it has also been discussed in anthropological terms that Apple users are like a tribe, easily recognized through their white earphones when they walk around this urbanized countries of the West. These objects are deeply embedded in our everyday life, as well as our identity. It means something to have an iPhone instead of a Samsung phone, for example. It's attached to our identity. Well, two former colleagues of mine, Andre Jansson and Magnus Andersson, refers to this as a reflexive culturalization in the terms of in the increasing investing of symbolic meanings to things and practices. We invest meanings in what technologies we use and how we use them, and link that to images of who we want to be and who we are. So media and culture are connected in many different ways. And as you know, we've been talking about social media platforms are not neutral artifacts. We make meaning about the processes and practices that we engage in social media through a range of complex processes, which I hope some of them we will disentangle in your group work. And the internet is always a local invention by its user. We have to look at the users. Not every user uses it the same way. It's always a local invention of the users. And there's a dialectic here between the social and material order, or in other terms, with the context where the user finds himself or herself in, and the actual technology used. I mean, an iPhone would mean different things in India as it would mean in Sweden, for example, and perhaps it would work differently also when it comes to, I mean, electricity supply and other things. What we experience is not the technology per se, but an immediately culturally inflected genre of usage. I find this very interesting and very enlightening, as is stated in the course literature here. So we should look at, when you look at the technology used in the community here, you're not looking at the technology, you're not looking at computer or Facebook or whatever you're going to study here, but you're looking at how it's used by a particular community. So it's in a culturally inflected genre of usage. Okay, so this leads me to an ethnography, doing ethnography on the net, ethnography. I mean, you understand the etymology of the world here. So the aim of, yes, we know the aim of ethnography is to be explorative and hypothesis generative rather than hypothesis testing. And ethnography is ethnography's virtual sibling, adapted to the characteristics of social worlds online or social media. It focuses exclusively on net-based social environment. Of course, you can always combine ethnographies with an ordinary ethnography, but what you're going to do here is an ethnography. You're going to focus exclusively on the net or on social media platforms here. So the internet here is understood as a social space, and the aim for you is to understand what social interactions are taking place here. The digital intensifies the dialectical nature of culture, intensifies the framed or mediated nature of analog and pre-digital life, as also is stated in the course literature. So there are many. I mean, it's kind of logical in the sense that we do ethnographies online, given its strong embeddedness in culture, both through reflexive culturalization, but also how cultures are played out online and communities are created online today. And there are, of course, many advantages with ethnographies. You as a researcher will be freed from the actual physical place to conduct your research observations. You will be able to do this from your bed at home. And what you're focusing on here is on the user-generating content flow. So you don't have to go there and stay there and be there. You can do this from home. So this is an advantage. And you know, okay, participant observation is another thing that's important here, as also stated in chapter 2 in the book here, Bollestorff, a very good chapter, by the way. So ethnography builds upon online fieldwork, builds upon also observations of online fieldwork, but it also builds upon you participating. You are going to if you're not going to go native, but you're going to try to get this deep understanding. And in order to get this deep understanding, you also have to participate. Now, I can give you an example. When I studied the gay community, a gay community online, and there was a lot of trolling and flaming and people using hateful speech to each other. And I didn't quite understand this until I participated myself and got attacked myself and started to feel this urge, to go out for those people who had attacked me and attack them in turn. In this sense, I then got this kind of deep understanding of trolling, and I think so to participate yourself is an important element here, not to forget. So you have to make an effort to understand the participants, and perhaps therefore you have to participate yourself as well. Yes. If we look at other aspects that differs on traditional ethnography to ethnography, anonymity, you're anonymous basically online. This can raise some ethical questions to really think about. Automatic archiving is also different. You can access discussions in some communities, in some online archives that goes way back, that you have access to that you wouldn't have in an online environment. So this automatic archiving, and it's also easier to access a community online. You don't have to negotiate entry to the same extent. I mean, sometimes it could be difficult, of course, but to the same extent as an offline ethnography. Ethical issues, of course, I will talk about that. What can we study and what can we not study? It's important that if you go to a locked community that you have the consent to participate. And we can distinguish between asynchronous and synchronous posting. Asynchronous allowing for greater reflection and planning, that you actually and synchronous posting happening in real time. But yes, the postings are happening in real time, synchronous, but you can also go back in history to look at it, which also means that you can reflect upon what you do and what you write, because it will be available after, which leads to an increasing reflexivity and planning of post compared to the offline. The physical absence online is compensated by different contextual and figurative representation, which gives the user larger possibilities to reflect on, test, and review different ways of action before they become part of the social interaction, as I just said. And this is why I also think I've been using this method a lot, because I think it has it's a good companion to sociological theories of late modernity, in the sense that individualization and reflexivity becomes enhanced here. And you can really, and this is really interesting to study online, as you will see. Yes, I said it before, you can work in combination with other methods, especially ethnographic. You won't have the time in this group work for that, though. We know that the offline and online world cannot be understood apart. Polymedia is a concept that is used in the book. Hybridity is another concept we've been talking about in the class, Chadwick's popular concept. Okay, camera back. There we are. Ethnography can very well be combined here with other methods, as you know. Quantitative content analysis. This is perhaps more feasible for you to actually, if you study in an online community in the discussion forum, you can actually count the posts. It's good background information, even though, generalization is not the aim here. Offline interviews is also a very good companion to an ethnography. But this is not ethnography, this is not material collected in natural situation, but it could help in understanding meaning making, for example. So even though most of you would not have the time to do this combination, it's good to know that you can combine it. So to think about when you go out here in the field, can I get rid of this? Okay. how to gain access to the field, to this community. How can you gain quick access? How can you find an identity on the field? To observe, listen, ask, participate is always a good combo. How to take field notes. I mean, for you it's easy since you're gonna take perhaps field notes at the same time as you observe. If you do an ethnography offline, it's more difficult to do this. But these are things you should think about before you go out and do your ethnography. And then to finalize, just some quick own experiences. As you know, I've been studying social media and the rationalities of political participation, basically wanting to understand contemporary political participation in connected society. What motivates? Why do people participate politically online? This has been my research questions. I've studied this on different levels. On parliamentary level, studying Nina Larsson, and I'm doing some studies this year as well. Her blog, she was hello, okay, she was a politician who used I mean, you can see her blog here, her other blog. She used Facebook, she used Twitter. She also had an interactive web page. Then I also studied activist participation on an activist level, how they use social media. This was in southern Stockholm. They fought to save their bathhouse that the city of Stockholm wanted to destroy. And they also used Facebook, a blog, Twitter, as well as Ning, which is kind of a Facebook. I mean, you see here the southern suburb. They created this Ning page where you could have, you know, events, create events, join groups, blog, post photos, post movies, etc. And then, as I mentioned, I also studied a gay community online, studied political participation on a more pop cultural level. Cruiser, which is the biggest Nordic community for LGBT people. So here's my profile picture on this community. It's kind of like Ning. You can join clubs, you can upload photos, movies, you can blog, etc. And here I studied particularly political clubs. These clubs, some kind of like an icon you placed on your profile page to see kind of a content of declaration. You can see that you're an activist, yes, for sure, anti the conservative alliance, anti-Nazism, etc. As well as you could join, you know, She's. I like She's. I joined this group for She's. So I studied political participation in this group as well as in the forum and forum threads. So I've been using ethnography quite extensively in my studies, and since I think it's important that we learn from each other's mistakes and problems, I will just finalize this lecture by giving you two examples of problems that I encountered. Problem number one is ethical. Are these public, or private? With Nina, it was kind of easy because she only used public. All her profiles were public. Her Facebook profile was public. Her blog was public. Her Twitter feed was public. So you didn't need to connect to her or even be a member of this network. You could see it anyway. And the same with the bathhouse activist. The problem was with Cruiser that you had to become a member in order to access the information. So then the ethical issues becomes a little bit more accentuated in a sense. Now this is the page here where you have to become member. Here, become member. At the same time, as you see here, they still display people's profile pictures. So it could be, or how, and it says here it only takes 1 minute to, where does it say that? No, it actually doesn't say, but it goes, you become a member directly if you just sign up here. So it's kind of like more semi-public, and then you have to look at other issues. Are they acting as if the information was public there or not? I mean, in my case, I studied political discussions where people attacked each other, so they were very much acting as if the information was public. So in this sense, I could argue that studying them was reasonable from an ethical point of view. I could also argue that, I mean, we in media and communication studies have been studying letters to the editor for a long time, and it doesn't take any more difficulties to subscribe to a newspaper than it does to become a member here. So ethical issues is also so this I could also argue for this. And then when I did interviews and when I studied forum threads, I actually asked the thread starters if I could include them in my research, and I got a yes. So when it's password protected, when you have to become a member, you have to think about ethical issues. I mean, the Association of Internet Researchers, AIR, is one good source where you can look at ethical guidelines doing your research. The second and final problem I want to discuss with you is when you're supposed to aim for a deep cultural understanding. The problem with the cruiser study, the gay community, was that I didn't like them. They were rude. They were nasty people. So how to do an ethnography in a community where you actually feel so alienated from what is going on there? But I had to make an effort to understand the participant. And for me, what happened was when I actually spent more time there, participated myself, got caught up in this game, as it was, more like a game of attacking each other. I realized that I was acknowledged, I was attacked, which was a good thing. People who wasn't attacked, they had a harder time. So I was attacked, I got caught up in the game, I started to be rude myself. So I got this kind of understanding by spending time there. But it's not easy, as I want to share with you, to do an online ethnography, or an ethnography for that case in a community where you don't really like the people. Not the least since you have to spend so much time there. Okay, so that's it, folks. Thank you for listening. There will be no questions for you to answer before Thursday's lecture. It will be all in plenum. We will all meet and gather. And first of all, I want you to think about what is not clear about the group work and what you're expected to do. And do bring those questions with you, because Sylvain and me will not be that available online after Thursday. You need to find it very clear. Okay, number one. Number two, what is not clear about this presentation? I mean, if you find that some things need to be explained further when it comes to doing digital ethnography, I think we can discuss this in class. So bring these discussions with you to the class as well. So, and then of course I'll just remind you about the research presentations. But I will either hand out you the schedule for that on Thursday, or we will talk about, or I will upload it on Studentportalen. Okay, so see you Thursday, and take care. Bye.